I want to start this video with a question. Now, would you wait until you had an abscess in your tooth to start regularly brushing your teeth? Probably not. Would you wait until you had a heart attack to look at how you eat or to try to move your body and be physically well? I sure hope not. But that's exactly the way that we look at our mental wellness. We don't talk about it. We don't do anything about it until we are in a state of crisis for many of us, because it is not normalized in our society. So that's exactly what I'm going to be covering in this video: how to normalize mental wellness. And to do that, we need to be able to respectfully and fluently talk about mental illness. My name is Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, the founder of Real Love Revolution and Boundary Bootcamp, and the author of Boundary Boss. I want to let you guys know how much I appreciate all of your comments. You're such an active group, and I love it so much. So please keep them coming, because you know I read them all. And before we get started, I want to make sure that you subscribe to this channel, because you're sitting here watching it. So just hit the bell so that you can get notified whenever I do something new. So let's move into mental wellness, which is what this episode is about today. Think about the ages, like when you are between the ages of, and maybe you are this age right now, 18 and 29. We have life transitions at every age and stage, but that's a particularly confusing time. We are growing to the point where we need to separate from our family of origin. Many of us are moving out, going to college, doing lots of different things for the first time in our lives, really being independent in a very particular way. And this last year really put a crimp in that experience for so many people, where, this important time of life got interrupted by a global pandemic. Now, there's nothing we could do about that, but what the CDC has done some studies, and what it's showing us is that the 18 to 29-year-old age group and 29 to 38, I think those were the two highest age groups that were most impacted by having more symptoms of anxiety and more depressive symptoms. So, May being Mental Health Month, this is a very important topic. We all need to be able to talk about it. So the basics, I started off the top of this video talking about how we wouldn't wait until something was terrible with our physical health, or we try not to, before handling it. Finally, the medical community in the last, 2.5 decades, let's say, has gotten it together to think that prevention is pretty much where it's at, right? Right. This is exactly the same thing with your mental wellness. So let's talk about things that can really help you stay in a balanced state of mental health. So some of these things we have control over and some of them we don't. But with prevention, let's talk about what we do have control over. Trying to get more sleep. That is something that you can at least put in the effort. Listen, if you're a single mom, if you're working 3 jobs, if you're getting up at 4 a.m., then that might be impossible. If you are in your residency to become a doctor, that might be impossible. But you can try, if you're not in an extreme circumstance, to have better sleep patterns. Meaning, what are your rituals before you go to bed? What is it that you're doing? Are you even putting a number on it? They say that we should try to get at least 7, 8 hours of sleep a night would be better. If you are sleeping only 5 hours a night, it is not enough. And a lot of times, at least in my own life, I found that I could do that when I was younger, but it definitely impacted me. But as I've aged, there's no way in hell I could not function on 5 hours a night. I used to think it was a badge of honor that I didn't sleep a lot, but trust me, it probably just accelerated the aging of my cells. So sleep is one important aspect. Moving your body if you're able. Doing something, even if it's walking, right? If you can walk outside, if you can do it outside, that would be great. Being in any kind of nature, even if you live in a city, finding a park whether it's on, 2nd Avenue and 15th Street, the one I mean, New York is, where you could just walk around. There's a loop there. You can go to Central Park where you can still stay far enough away from other folks. But getting out in nature, any kind of nature, can be really helpful for your state of mind. And doing it while you're moving your body is even better. Limit news. Now, I'm not saying be uninformed. I'm saying don't watch traumatic and dramatic news over and over again. You can read your news, which is what I usually choose to do, so that you can stop if it becomes too much. If you are an empath, a highly sensitive person, the news, anything super violent or anything super disturbing, if you can't control how quickly you are seeing it or how much stimulation there is, at least for me, it has a lasting impact on my conscious and my unconscious mind. I'll find myself dreaming about these things. So again, be informed. Yes, it's important. Don't mindlessly be watching news all the time, because it is the same horrible stories over and over again. Also, limit your social media. We've had a year of social media becoming more and more volatile, and people being very polarized about all of these things that have been going on societally. So my feeling is there's nothing wrong with being on social media, but limit it. It can't be something that you're just on all day long. Take the alerts off your phone. You have got to stop the screens, all the screens, by a certain point at night if you think you're going to sleep, because you need to be signaling your brain. You can get these little glasses. I was talking to my friend Gabby the other day, and I was like, what are you wearing? She was wearing like those blue tinted kind of glasses and she's like, oh yeah, I go to bed 9 o'clock every night and I need these. I start wearing these at around 6. So I was going to try those. They do something for, instead of waking your body up, it's sort of telling your body, even if you're looking at a screen, it's telling your body you're going to be resting soon. So I am going to give that a go. If any of you have done that already, let me know. I'd be curious to see what your experience is. Be mindful of what you put in your body. Again, to the best of your ability, eat well. Some folks don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables all of the time. But if you do your best to eat some. Same thing, with hydration. Like, we all pretty much have access to water. Make sure that you're hydrating enough per day, because I can tell you from my therapeutic practice that dehydration exacerbates anxiety. And sometimes dehydration can mimic anxiety. Same thing with consuming too much caffeine. So I'm asking you, if you are wanting to have better mental wellness, because that is what this episode is about, these are all things that you can do to that end. So hydrate, eat as well as you are able within the capabilities that you have within your life. Mindfulness practices. So much of this stuff is free, right? There are apps. Deepak Chopra has an app, which is the breathing app. And I'll give you guys, I created a guide for you for this episode. So I'll put all of and a bunch of other mental health resources I'll put in there for you. So you don't have to remember anything. You'll just download it later. But that app I love. And it's just breathing. And if you did 10 minutes of that in the morning, and they actually measure your natural breath cadence, I guess we'd call it. And we're trying to slow it down, right? Take longer, deeper breaths. Breathing not just into the shallow part of the lung, but into the lower part of the lung. And just take a deep breath right now and see how it feels. Just breathing. Relax your shoulders. These are just simple things that we can do all day long if we remember. I'll also give you something from an incredibly skilled energy medicine expert in New York City. Her name is Lara Riggio. That she has so much amazing stuff out there that's free about how to handle all of the collective stress that we've been under. But these are things that I do all the time to maintain my mental wellness. So she's got super easy. She's got one that's the cross posture, where you cross your arms. If you're listening, you can't see me, but I'm crossing my arms and sort of just putting them in my hands. Don't worry, there'll be a link where you can see it. Cross your ankle cross one ankle over the other, and just breathe for a few minutes a day. And I'll put a link to that video in the guide that'll go along with this episode. And that you can literally do anywhere. And it bilaterally engages your brain and absolutely signals your body to relax, to get out of fight or flight if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling stressed. Talk. We have to be able to talk to friends, to a therapist if you have one, and if you don't, I'm going to give you resources, and there's a lot of free resources. And now, it used to be that if you lived in an area where there was not quality mental health, you were pretty much screwed, because what are you going to do? That's really not the case, because the fact that so much mental health assistance has moved to being virtual because of the global pandemic, that really does even the playing field some. So I will give you resources for some that are paid, which there's one that I'm associated with called BetterHelp, and free resources as well, because everyone needs access to mental health resources if we are going to be mentally well. That is what it's about. It can't just be for people with money, and it can't just be for a particular section of the country. It's got to be for everyone. And part of this normalizing this conversation, that really is my intention, is wanting to have people talk about it. It is normal. The same way you want to go to a dentist or brush your teeth to make sure that you don't lose them. This is the same with our mental wellness. It won't just do it itself. We are human beings, and we are wired to be incredibly complex. And then we have inherited situations that we have, whether it's inherited trauma, whether we had a traumatic background, or whether there's mental health issues or challenges that are in our family system. So many things that come together, that sort of coalesce to make up what is the way that we relate to our mental wellness. So there's nothing wrong with you, no matter what it is that you're struggling with. It's just like how some people have a leaning towards maybe diabetes in their family, or maybe you have psoriasis in your family, a skin condition. Maybe in my family, there's lots of addiction and there's lots of cancer. So there's nothing wrong. And I've had cancer more than once. So it isn't like there's something wrong with you or you are flawed in some terrible way if you have mental challenges in your family line, in your lineage. But you have to know how to deal with it. And that's what prevention is all about. We have to give it the credit and take care of it and honor it the way we would anything else. And part of what blocks us from doing that is the stigma around mental wellness. I don't even like to call it mental illness, because really we're striving for mental wellness. And if you're having challenges in your mental wellness, it's just like having challenges in your physical wellness, right? We handle that. We don't feel responsible for that. So I think that, meaning we don't feel ashamed about that. We're like, oh yeah, there's cancer that runs in my family. I don't think that makes me monumentally broken, or I'm a cancer survivor a couple of times. That doesn't, again, there's nothing wrong with me. I just need to deal with it. And this is the same thing with our mental wellness, especially now, because the pandemic brought it to this really crucial tipping point for many of us, and I see it as an opportunity. Other prevention ideas. You can journal how you're feeling. Do a mind dump in the morning. Don't edit it, just write what's on your mind. A lot of times clearing that space is very helpful. Have a wellness buddy. Have someone that you trust that you can check in with. How are you feeling? Meaning, how are you feeling psychologically this week? Like actually talking about psychologically how we are doing, as opposed to just talking about the physical stuff of how we're doing. And doing your best, as I said before, to get some time outside. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is that words matter. And how we talk about our mental wellness or mental challenges matters too, because we can either perpetuate the stigma, or we can do something that makes the stigma less. So I think we should do something to make the stigma less. And so I found this great article by a woman named Emily Balthius, I think her name is. She's also a psychotherapist. So I'll link to the actual article in the show notes, but I'm going to give you a couple of her ideas, and I think they're great. Instead of using mental illness, right, as this aggregate term, instead use mental illnesses, right? Like there's multiple things, because the thing is, mental illness is like not talking about what's wrong with someone specifically. It's like saying they're just unwell, but it matters what the person has. Or if we're talking about someone who has a diagnosis, it's saying that they have a mental illness, because mental illness itself is too broad a term, right? It doesn't really reflect what the individual may be dealing with. If you say that someone has cardiac issues, Emily says, it doesn't really offer much information, right? There are many different types of heart problems that someone could have. Not all patients with cardiac problems have had a heart attack. So again, it's the same thing with mental wellness. Mental wellness is that not everyone with mental health issues has been suicidal or depressed. There's so many different expressions of this. So another thing is, don't use like afflicted by mental illness or suffers from mental illness or is a victim of mental illness. Instead, you can use living with a mental illness or living with a mental challenge, right? Because you are living with it and you are not the thing. So having a mental health diagnosis isn't necessarily a negative thing, right? Suffering implies that someone is unwell and unhappy. And I think that that is so true. People with mental health issues are able to live fulfilling, healthy lives. And there are a wide range of treatments, so there are many reasons to stay hopeful in this process. So also, don't use mentally ill person or person who is mentally ill. Instead, use person with a mental illness or a mental challenge, or person living with a mental health issue, which is the one that I like, right? Person living with a mental health issue, because that's what it is. So people with mental health issues have far more sides to them than their mental illnesses. That's just like, I don't want to be defined by the fact that I'm in recovery from alcohol addiction or by the fact that I'm a cancer survivor. And I don't even really talk about those things much, not because I'm ashamed, simply because they're already woven into the tapestry of my life. They're just one very small aspect of who I am. And my own mental health challenges, they don't define me, right? They're just a part of me that makes up the package that is me. And that is true for every single solitary one of you. And I think that, using the term, normal behavior, as opposed to, maybe using like usual behavior or typical behavior, is less, because really, what is normal, right? What is normal, and who has had some kind of a normal life or a normal upbringing? I don't know. I think most of us have had a unique experience, and it makes other people, like, there is this sense, if you see something on television and you're like, oh, that's like the perfect family or the perfect person, it's this illusion, because there is none of that. Nobody is perfect. We are all just human beings, literally doing the best that we can in the situation that we're in. So there really isn't any normal. And then instead of substance abuse, try substance use disorder, right? Your relationship to substances is disordered. Just like we talk about with eating issues, we say disordered eating, because that's what it is, which makes it less of this forever diagnosis. And another thing, the last thing that Emily talks about in this article that I was reading, is instead of saying that someone committed suicide, we would say died by suicide or lost by suicide. Because when someone believes that ending their life is truly the best decision, they are not seeing reality around them clearly, right? This is a symptom of some mental illnesses, not all, but to say that someone committed suggests blame, which I totally agree with her. So we would never blame someone for dying of cancer, now would we? No, you're right, Emily. So we should use language that avoids blame if someone's mental health issue caused them to die by suicide. So I say, let's keep this conversation going. I had this thought, because of this 18 to 29-year-old and, let's say 25 to 39-year-old, like that generation. I'm considering that the next gen, especially the 18 to 29-year-old. So I've put all of this information in a little downloadable guide for you. And I want to tell you about something super exciting that I've also created for you. I am really committed to this next generation being the end of the disease to please generation, being the end of all of this suffering, because you don't actually know the language of healthy boundaries. And I wasn't surprised to see the survey that the CDC did that said that 18 to 29-year-olds were impacted more than any other age group in this last year of being in a global pandemic. You're it, people. You are the next gen. And I gotta say, this dysfunctional boundary stuff must end with this gen. It just must. So if that is you, I've created something really cool for you. It's basically a course called Boundary Boss Next Gen, and it's going to be teaching you the specific things that you need to know to manage what it is that you're going through. So in the book, I have all kinds of things that are amazing, but this course itself is really geared towards you, if you're transitioning, if you're moving out of the home that you grew up in, if you're going to college, if you couldn't go back to college because of the global pandemic, if you are in your first job, if you are dealing with compare and despair online, social media stuff, dealing with your family of origin, difficulty breaking away from them, how to manage your friendships right now, how to date, boundaries in dating. I'm putting all of that into a mini course because you're our next generation. So all you need to do to get the information for Boundary Boss Next Gen little course is download the guide that I created for this episode of the Terri Cole Show, which is terricole.com/mental health. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for hanging out with me. To be continued, and as always, take care of you.